Hi there. Welcome to Women in Business, where I share the real-world stories of fabulous women who've made their mark in the business world. In this podcast, we look at the educational and professional journeys and their choices, as well as the aha moments that have led each of my guests to their success. When I started my business, I didn't know anything about the opportunities that were out there. But over time, and especially during the pandemic, I've seen women pivot their careers, create new careers, and shape their own futures. My hope for our listeners, whether you're a young girl dreaming big or a woman ready for a change, that you can find some inspiration in these interviews and see all the different possibilities that are out there for you and become inspired to create your own journey and go your own path. So let's get started with this week's guest. So thank you very much for coming along today, Willow, and tell everybody, who are you and what do you do?
Thanks for having me, Erin. I'm Willow Paule, and I'm a content repurposing specialist. And that means that I help people take their content and create more content out of it, but it's with a very intentional way, so that I want them to be able to spend less time creating content, getting on that hamster wheel of creating content all the time, and be able to spend more time with their clients, which is what they really want to be doing.
Absolutely, because it can be so, like you say, it's a hamster wheel. It's the same thing gets talked about continuously if you're doing it for business and everything. So yeah, saving time by not having to regurgitate from scratch. I think someone told me when I was teaching, why reinvent the wheel? Use what you've already got.
Yeah.
So we're going to go back to, I always say this, to little Willow, child Willow. So obviously your accent, where are you from?
I am from the US and I grew up on the East Coast. I grew up in a really small little town in the middle of a very country setting, very conservative place, but there was a kind of a small enclave of very diverse and interesting people who were very open-minded, and that's where I grew up.
So whereabouts in the East, what's the name of the area?
I grew up in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. And it's not so far from Washington, D.C., but a very different surrounding.
Yeah. So did you get to go to lots of places in America when you were living there? Because just a little caveat for people, she doesn't live there now, but we'll get into that a little bit later. So, because I think, so I used to live in America, but I only lived there for 2 years. And when I went there, everybody would ask me about places in England. And I would say, oh, no, I've not been there. Oh, no, I've not been there. So when I came home, I started to try and go to those places because I thought, well, this is my country and I haven't been to these places. So did you go to Washington, D.C. if you were close? What other areas in America did you travel to?
Yeah, luckily we got to go to Washington, D.C. pretty often when I was growing up. And we'd also go to Baltimore, which was another interesting big city. And I guess we were pretty well traveled. We went to visit people, family in other parts of the U.S. But it is kind of funny when you're living overseas and someone asks, have you ever been to this state? And you're like, no, I've never been there. But I've been across the world.
Exactly. I mean, it's like when I lived in Nevada, what blew my mind was that England would fit inside it. To me, England is a huge place and there's all these places I haven't been. And yet that fitted into one state. And yet you can be at one side of this massive country. And obviously there are so many states, you're not going to have gone, unless it's been your goal, you're not going to go to them all. Getting back on track though, because this is obviously your journey of your career. But I'm just obsessed with America, just have to say that. My son's just come back from America on holiday, the other son. So when you were at school, what were you interested in when you were a child? Where were your strengths? Where did you go?
So I was really lucky that I grew up with parents who let me explore my own curiosities. And also I grew up in a school system that allowed me to do that, because I feel like, well, later in my life, I taught children in different environments, and I found that they didn't always get to do that. A lot of kids have to sort of learn for the test, and they have to make sure that they have everything memorized. And
welcome to England.
Yeah.
Welcome to the English education.
Yeah, and it sort of beats the curiosity that like trying to discover things for yourself. It kind of beats that out of you. So luckily I was homeschooled for the first few years of my life with my mom and my brother. And things I can remember from that time period, I was young, but I remember like watching ants work outside, seeing what they were doing. And then we would do multiplication table conga lines around the house. So these are things that kind of stuck with me over the years. And then after that, I went to this intentional community school that was erected in an old barn. And we called our teachers by their first names, and we were allowed to stay out for recess all afternoon if we were all getting along with each other and playing a game together, which never happened, by the way. But there was like the excitement of that trying. And it was like an interesting place, kind of a hippie place where the parents would give those like super long hippie hugs that like make you want to look away. But it was a place where we really got to grow in our sense of self. And I think that's something that is I can look back and say, oh, I'm really grateful for that. I have had like those awful school experiences too, like in public school. It wasn't always because it was public school, just, I dealt and in private school I dealt with like bullying and all the stuff that kids have
So
to go through.
what age did you go from your intentional school to like state school?
I think I stayed at that intentional school. It's called Claymont. I was there until about 6th grade, and then I went to a private school because I think they only had elementary education at that school. So that was, I had to leave.
For people that might not know, what is 6th grade? What's the age?
It's about 12 years old.
Okay, so it's not like then you were going into middle school kind of.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
And I went to another private school, but that was not as fun of an experience. And then I went to public school. That was just for a year. And then I went to public school, and that was a new place where I was pretty weird and people were letting me know.
So did you feel weird, or did they make you feel weird because you'd been brought up in a community that was different from them?
I don't know that I was kind of aware of it because of the private school experience the year before, that I was weird. And then I found that other people felt the same way at this public school. But I also sort of carved out my own little niche of weird friends. And, like I had all these friends that were guys that would borrow my dresses when they wanted to be super, risque and wear dresses to school, or I would create willow crowns like from willow trees for my friends. And I remember the principal saying, lose the leaves. He didn't like that. But I was able to like carve out some relationships with people at the public school, and it actually turned out to be an okay place for me. I'm not sure about the education so much, but the social scene got better. And then should I talk about college too, or just?
Yeah. I mean, what kind of subjects though did you find that you thrived at high school?
Right. I really liked English back then. I enjoyed reading, and I enjoyed writing, and I remember really liking that. I also liked art, but there was no art at my school. So I didn't take any art classes. I wanted to study photography, but the photography teacher died, and then they never replaced him. So I didn't really have any options to do art in high school.
Okay, so your formative years in school didn't go so well. So then when you went to college, what did you choose to study?
So I really wanted to study photography. I've been taking photos on my own, and I did a semester in my local town, like just studying photography. And then I was going to do the next semester somewhere else in the US. And I also wanted to study Southeast Asia. And photography school, programs, there's a lot of photography programs, but there aren't so many Southeast Asia programs. So I had to find a school that had both of those things. So I went to school in Arizona. And
what drew you to South Asian studies?
So when I was 14, my parents sold their clothing business. They were entrepreneurs. They had a clothing business, and they sold it, and they decided that they wanted to take me and my brother on a trip around the world. So we went to Indonesia first because they had sourced their textiles from Indonesia and they were curious in the place. We'd never been there. We just saw the fabric from Indonesia. And so we came to Indonesia first for 2 months and we had a really good experience. Partially probably because we were a family traveling and Indonesians are really into family. So, we were always getting invited to people's houses or like going to weddings. So, I got interested in this place and wanted to come back. But I was just, oh, and then actually before college, I'd also been an exchange student to Thailand. I was supposed to go to Indonesia, but there were riots here the same year. So I had to go to Thailand and I had a really good time. And I wanted to study Thai and Indonesian languages. And so that was part of the reason why I wanted to study Southeast Asia.
Cool. And so you went to Arizona, and there was a school that was able to do both of those topics for you. Did you, when you left college, where did you think, were you going to always, were you going to be a photographer working for an agency, or what idea did you have that what your job was going to be when you left college?
So I never thought about jobs. I always had jobs since I was 14, but I never thought about money back then. I liked money, but I never thought about like how much money you have to survive. So I always had little businesses as a kid, like ever since I was 4 or something, I created rock people for sale, or I had a restaurant, and like one person would buy stuff from me. So I always had these ideas, but the idea of like how much money you need to survive, that kind of thing, I wasn't really that aware of that in my 20s when I was going to school. And so, and also in art school, I did, fine art. So there was no emphasis on money. It was almost like uncouth to talk about how you would make a living after school. And meanwhile, I was racking up like these huge, university fees that my parents helped me with, which I appreciate. But yeah, I feel like there was a disconnect there
Mm.
between, I just wanted to be a photographer and I wanted to make photos of people. And I enjoyed it because I felt like it helped me understand people better. And I was kind of an introvert, so it helped me get to know people on a deeper level. And I just liked exploring that. So I thought I might do events or, weddings. And I did some of that work. But I got out of school in 2004, and then the economy kind of totally failed in 2008. So it was a really hard time to get work. And then I kind of figured out, oh, I need to do other types of work to sustain myself, even if I'm going to keep making art.
So what were those jobs?
I've had a lot of jobs. When I was when I was still in university, I was working in group homes with kids who had been removed from their homes. And so I really enjoyed working with teenagers. And yeah, that was one of my jobs. I still keep in touch with some of those girls. And then I also worked with young people who were in juvenile programs, like in prison essentially for kids, or I I did a lot of like social service type jobs, working with like people with disabilities. And then I also worked in schools some, and I taught English overseas in Korea. I taught in Indonesia a bit. And I also had a job at the courts in Phoenix. It was a criminal court. So I would interview people do this like really deep interview with people about their lives. And I had to ask them all these personal questions about their drinking habits, their drug habits, and, what did they do in their crime? And I really liked that job a lot because I felt like I learned a lot about empathy, like how you use empathy to create a relationship with people.
I was going to
And
say
I find,
all the jobs that you've listed have all been people orientated. So, like you're saying about with the photography and everything, you over the time while you waited to get to where you are, you were picking up. We'd heard about this in a previous podcast about happenstance. So you pick skills up along the way that it's not exactly where you want to be, but you're learning in jobs as you go. And like you said, like learning empathy, learning how to approach people, learning about people's stories, and then being able to tell them on. What took you to, so where are you right now?
I am in my living room in Indonesia.
in Indonesia. So
Yeah.
what took you to Indonesia?
So just an interest in the place. Apparently, I told my mom when I was in fourth grade. I showed her a picture of some rice fields in Indonesia. I said, "Mom, I'm going to live there one day."
What do
So
you like about it so much? What drew you there?
I don't remember why I don't even remember saying that. But what I liked about this place was the art. There's a lot of interesting arts and crafts that people are doing here, and it's kind of a tropical, warm place. So there's people are very open and friendly, and they don't really have that stranger danger approach. And yeah, I was interested in a lot of the art here because I was studying fine arts, but also just from a personal perspective, I found like the textile arts interesting, the dance. There's all these different types of like trance dance here. I just found it very fascinating that it's like a very religious place in some ways, but it's also there's a lot of subcultures and people on the fringes that just have all different beliefs, and it's very diverse. So I was attracted by those things.
Does your parents still live in America, or did they follow you, or do they come and visit you often because they might like it there?
Yeah, so they still live in the US, and I wouldn't say they visit often, but they visit sometimes. It's a long trip, and they're getting up in years, but and yeah, it's just a super long trip, and it's very uncomfortable. But they love it when they come here.
Do you get go back to America often?
I haven't lately. I guess it kind of has to do with the pandemic and some health stuff. I haven't been able to go home in a long time, but I would like to be able to go home more often.
So then how did you get into your business that you have now then? So you've moved to Indonesia, you've settled where you've settled. What started your business? What got you into the repurposing?
So I was looking for work that I could do online, and I had some transferable skills from my photography business in the past. I did kind of just touched on that, but I'd done some event and wedding photography in the past. So I learned some things about having a business, and I was thinking, what of that is transferable to the online world? And then I stumbled upon virtual assistants, and so I started my business as a virtual assistant, and and then I did a lot of different kinds of work. And
Which you
then,
have to do as a virtual assistant because you find that, I mean, been coming along this. I keep sitting there thinking, am I a virtual assistant anymore? Because the amount of work and things that I could pigeonhole myself into different characterizations, but then there's so many, so I just started calling myself a jack of all trades because you keep getting asked to do all these different things that you don't actually fit into what people think virtual assistants are, which is just the secretary that does the admin for you. When you do so many stuff now, because obviously it's moved on with the online world, everything that needs to be done. So yes, I can understand that, becoming a virtual assistant and then doing everything different.
yeah, and it was a good exercise in figuring out what I was good at helping people with, and what wasn't like my top skill, like the things I could do, but the things that weren't the best things for me to do. And so I kind of discovered that I could help people the most with content and content creation. It kind of brought together, my love for like visual arts with the idea of like helping small business owners and entrepreneurs get their message out to the world, like storytelling and talking about what they're doing for their, the people that they help.
So what do you like about what you do for people?
What I like is a few things. What I like is helping people get clear on how they want to get their message out to the world. That's one thing I really enjoy about my work. And that's because sometimes people are sort of approaching content as something they must do, but not in a way that feels natural or fun for them. So
Mm.
I think part of what I do with my clients is helping them identify how they want to get their message out to the world. There's not just one way to do that. And I think that's one of the cool things about owning your own business, which is most of the people I work with are like solopreneurs, or they, they own their own business. And why create a business where you dislike many parts of it if you don't have to,
Yeah.
that's one of the benefits of owning your own business, that you can kind of structure it how you want to. And so that's one of the things that I help my clients do, is identify how they want to create content, how they want to create content, but also how to do that in a way that lands with the audience that they'd like to attract. The other thing I like is taking their source content and creating something new from it. I find it to be a very creative process. It's more like an art than a science. So you can kind of approach it from many different angles. And that's what I like about content repurposing, is that it's not like this set in stone structure. It's something that you can do in different ways.
I mean, that's what the thing is. Some people can judge other people's jobs and think, oh, well, that's dead easy. So, you go along and somebody says, oh, I repurpose other people's content. Well, that's easy. You just cut and paste out of the thing. And do. But it isn't, because you have to take it. You take their words out, but then re-edit it so that it fits the purpose that you want it to go out for. It's not just we'll copy this paragraph and shove it out as content, isn't it?
Yeah.
So then you've got to try and get them to see where the important parts are, I'm assuming, because I find, like, with my clients, that they can write a brilliant blog and it's long, but you don't want to just copy and paste a paragraph because it's meaty. You want to pick out what's important in it and reword it. So now you've got cars going past.
Oh, you heard a cow? Wow, I didn't hear that.
No, not a cow, a car.
Oh, a car.
Like a truck. Just for the listeners, we had to pause a little bit because poor Willow, she had a cat that was very demanding and wanted to come in, like my dog does at the door. And now that we've just had a truck go by. So I'm taking, it's not a very quiet area.
It's you never can tell, I'll put it that way. It's not a place where you know what's going to happen next. And then there's earthquakes sometimes. So if I suddenly get up and run outside, you know what happens.
And we have to pause this podcast because Willow just had an earthquake. Not, she hasn't really. So again, your business is sort of like very like people centric. It's all about the person, not the doing the job for them, not just taking their content and repurposing it like people would think. It's really getting to know the person, the business, and helping them to strategize. Because I think quite a lot of people think that content is, oh, well, I had a bowl of bran flakes this morning, I'll put that up as content. Or let's take a picture of the food I'm eating. Or, I mean, it's about like the life that you live in, the business, and what you're giving off to the people. So you have to get the content right, and you do have to have a strategy, sort of like a path to go down. Otherwise, you're just whacking out content for no reason. You've got to have, well, what's your goal? That kind of thing. So you help them figure all that out, and then show them how their content can actually. How do you do that? Do you do it in a webinar form, or do you do one-on-one?
So with my bread and butter, I guess that's what it's called, service, my main service, I actually devote the whole first month to getting to know the client, creating strategy, creating a content plan, making sure that I understand their brand voice. And so we go through all these things so that I can do the best job possible of creating content for them that sounds like them. It might even sound better. I mean, since I have more time to devote to it than they do. It's not like saying that I'm better than them, but they have other aspects of their business that they need to concentrate on. And
you also find that they don't see the wood for the trees. Sometimes it takes an outside person to come in to see the gold that they can't see no more.
A lot of times you can create content that people like, but is it creating the outcomes that you want in your business? Like, why are we creating this content? What is the strategy behind it? So being very intentional about creating content that can help you meet the outcomes that you want to make in your business. Not saying that like content can necessarily get you 10 clients or something. I think it's like a piece of your marketing. It's not the only thing that goes into marketing. But I do think being intentional about the content that you create is important. Like what you were talking about, just sharing your cereal. Well, like maybe that's something that people identify with. It's possible that that could help. I know I follow somebody on Instagram who she's always sharing videos of her making iced matcha lattes or something, but that's kind of become like a signature thing for her. And it's not the only thing she shares. So her other content, that's sort of the content to let people in on a little aspect of her life that's personal. But then she's also, creating other content that helps people understand how she helps her clients and what she does online so that they have a clearer picture of why they'd want to work with her. So I think it's all, yeah. So the first month I spend getting really clear on who the client is. And yeah, you're right. It is about the relationship, and it's about me understanding what they do and also like how they serve the world, and then figuring out how to get that out in a content form.
So if you had a woman that wanted to change the field that she was in, or a young girl looking to create her own business, move to another country, live her best life the way she wants to live it, what would be your advice to them?
I think do your research, but don't get too wrapped up in doing your research. Like allow yourself to make mistakes. It's okay. And you can learn from other people, but everything's going to be unique to you. So you have to just kind of experience things sometimes. I think it's important to listen to your intuition, but to couple that with doing research and understanding why you're doing something or how to do something. I think those two things together are a good mix.
Brilliant. Well, thank you for coming to talk to me today and introducing. What is your cat called?
I have two cats. One is Mikey. That's the highly annoying one that was yelling. And my other cat is Meow Meow.
Meow Meow. I love that. Yeah, well, thank you for coming along and being interviewed today and telling people about your journey and career and journey to another country. It's been lovely to talk to you.